Texans go up to Green Bay to face a team in the Packers who was without their starting quarterback, Jordan Love, for 2 games, and yet Jordan Love, in the 4 games that he started, has done some pretty damn good things. Texans at 5-1 have done some pretty damn good things themselves. And I hate to frame this as young QB phenom versus young QB phenom, but that's what they're going to do. And ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to. Thanks to BetUS for sponsoring this video. But really, the other thing that I hate to do is frame things in terms of turnovers. And yet, there's some extreme things going on both sides of the ball. And a lot of it relates to the quarterbacks as well. So if we look at this game, which is at noon. It feels like a really big game, but for some reason it's at noon, and yet it's big enough that it's going to be Jim Nantz and Tony Romo. C.J. Stroud right now tied for 5th in passing yardage, 5th in total touchdown passes with 10. We saw the offense, I think, open up, and you could see the potential for what they could do last week when Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce were able to have explosive run plays. I think that's going to start to be more of a thing as long as Joe Mixon is healthy. But C.J., by his words, not mine, has been sloppier with the football this year. He's got 4 interceptions where he had 5 all of last season. And they face a Packers defense that leads the NFL with 17 takeaways. Xavier McKinney has 5 all on his own. That's been a really good pickup for the Packers. CJ's dialed in on avoiding turnovers. I think both these offenses are going to get their yardage. I think that CJ is extra dialed in and aware of how opportunistic the Packers are, and I think they try to play it safe as much as possible. They're going to try to work the run game. I think this does end up being a lower score game. Earlier in the week, the point total was 47.5 earlier in the week. That's been bumped up since then over at BetUS, but the Packers are 3-point favorites. I think this is going to be a 1-point game, but I like the under on this because I think both sides are going to play it somewhat conservatively. Both teams can run. The Packers for sure can run. The Texans, I think, can run the ball. So I put the under on it right now at BetUS. You can get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit all the way up to $2,000. Your second and third deposits, they'll give you a 125% deposit. Go check it out at BetUS, betus.com. Jordan Love's only played 4 games, and he's got 12 touchdowns in that time. So he's got the second most passing touchdowns in the league right now in only 4 games. And yet he's also thrown 6 interceptions in those 4 games. I thought Greg Cosell summed up Jordan Love and where he is right now nicely.
I think Jordan Love is physically and just traits-wise a top 3-4 quarterback in this league. He still has some things to clean up. He still has a tendency to throw a few too many balls off balance, falling backwards, and that has to be cleaned up. There's no question, because that will lead to some bad throws.
So people in Green Bay will say that he's more Favre than Rodgers. Rodgers is always extremely careful with the football. Favre was playing the way he did in an era where it was a little bit more tolerant of that type of play, where now Jordan Love with a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, that doesn't cut it anymore. He's got to tweak that a little bit. The Texans started to show their opportunistic side last week, but as we know, they are very, very banged up. The offense in a nutshell is, hey, this is a Kubshanistani offense where they run the ball really well. Josh Jacobs is the 5th leading rusher in the NFL. They tie that into the play action. So Love's got the highest touchdown rate, but he's also got the second highest interception rate. And that's pretty much it. Like the Packers fans would want Jordan Love to be more sober Favre than Vicodin Favre. And last year in the first half of the season, he was Vicodin Favre. Then he metaphorically sobered up and was non-Vicodin Favre for the second half of last season. So you thought, oh, okay, he figured it out, right? The decision-making is good. But no, he jumps back in, and now he's throwing a boatload of interceptions again. To a plethora of they've got no number one wide receiver per se. Jayden Reed. I think Jayden Reed is the guy who's playing like a household name, yet is not yet a household name, but is top 5 in the NFL in a lot of regards. And I would almost put him not as a direct comparison to Deebo Samuel, but in terms of production, he just shows up every week. He's going to get a touchdown reception. Like you've got to keep eyeballs on him. But then you add Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs to the mix, and I don't think it's so simple that there really isn't a guy that you can pick and say, okay, well, we'll have Derek Stingley travel around with this guy, because they execute the offense really, really well. And part of that is the run game. They tie the run game to the play action. They scheme guys wide open. All of those things that you want to see out of a Coop Shanistani offense, they do that. Here is Matt Burke talking about Josh Jacobs and how everything kind of starts with him.
Yeah, obviously, like basically the crux of their offense is designed around that. They're top 5 in a lot of categories in the run game. I've always thought Jacobs was a really good back. Just really respected him every time I've gone against him. They're doing a really good job. It's sort of like the start of everything they do in their offense. I mean, you can talk about the explosives and where they rank in explosive passing game. It probably ties in directly a lot to their run game and having to respect that. So, I think the other thing is he's really good at falling forward for kind of those extra couple yards or just not getting knocked back. So you just keep them manageable behind in front of the sticks and those sort of things. So a lot of kind of hidden yardage in that run game. So we've got to be really good at being physical and getting hats to the ball to sort of stop that for sure.
So this is where the injuries really mount up. So Mario Edwards leaves. Now, Mario Edwards is going to be replaced not by Denico Autry specifically, because Denico's not really a defensive tackle. He's going to go down and rush inside on passing downs. But Tim Settle, Kurt Heinisch, Khalil Davis, who just always shows up with a little bit of an elbow to somebody, those guys will be basically the replacement for Mario Edwards as run stuffers. Foley Fatukasi practiced the other day, so I think he's going to play unless I missed some news. And Denico Autry, and the addition of Denico Autry, this is where it could get exciting, because Denico is just a different type of dude. Like Nick Caserio called him a junkyard dog. He just flat out brings it, and he can rush inside, he can rush outside. I think the Texans' defensive line, in their ability to put heat on Jordan Love and bring out Vicodin Favre as much as possible, force him into some bad decisions, that's going to be the key to this game. Turnovers and pass rush for the Texans defense, the run defense, and the defense in total. Henry To'oTo'o and Azeez Al-Shaair are going to be out, so Neville Hewitt and probably Hanson are going to start in their place. This I was really pessimistic about this. One of our listeners brought this up yesterday, though. The Texans linebackers, the starting linebackers, the young guys in To'oTo'o and Christian Harris at the back half of last season, both those guys have made a lot of improvements with D'Amico Ryans as their coach. Not their linebackers coach specifically, but we know he's heavily involved in that. You take D'Amico's history as a linebackers coach and bringing in Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, working with Azeez Al-Shaair as he's younger. And our listener brought up that, hey, is there a chance that Neville Hewitt and Hanson are much better this year than they were last year? And I thought, yes. I don't think that's a pie-in-the-sky notion at all. I think with linebackers, the Texans have demonstrated almost like an Astros-like ability with the way they are with pitchers to get the absolute most out of linebackers. Neville Hewitt came in last week in relief and played really well. The key versus this team, the Packers. The Packers are a top 5 team with their play action on offense. The Texans are a bottom 5 team defensively and biting on play action. So Neville Hewitt has been a guy that loves to come up and thump in the run game. In the past, he's got to fight those tendencies as much as possible, because Green Bay will make you pay for that. But I am optimistic after Neville Hewitt's performance last week, and then just the general hope and theory that Hanson will be better this year too, because he hasn't had any snaps or many snaps at all as a linebacker. That's enough. But that's a huge challenge. And obviously, you're down a starting cornerback in Lassiter. You're down Jimmy Ward again this week. Keeping everything in front of you and not making these mental errors that have led to the big explosive plays, that's just absolutely huge this week. 2 big X factors in this game. One, I'll say Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce in the run game in general. I was not super blown away by the blocking last week. I think it improved in some regards. Some of these wham plays that were really effective are nice, and they complement the zone running game. but you can't really do a steady diet of them because defenses pick up on how to stop it. So it's a change up. It's something to keep defensive linemen honest, but you can't expect them to go out there and run wham 20 times in a game. There needs to be a bread and butter run game. So there were some improvements with the blocking, but more than anything, there were way too many stuffs. There were way too many tackles for loss on a down by down basis. But with Mixon and Pierce, you have an explosiveness and a certain element that commands respect from a defense that I do think it opens things up. They just got to keep building on it. And I'm hoping that, this is Dameon Pierce, who looked a lot like he did in 2022 when he ran last week. And I thought had a couple examples of being crisper with his read and seeing the field better than he did last year or even in training camp this year. So even behind imperfect blocking last week, he did some good things. Versus in training camp, he had bad blocking and he wasn't doing anything at all. Last week on that long touchdown run, there were 2 or 3 unblocked guys, but Dameon read the linebackers, understood that the one linebacker was over pursuing. The other linebacker had been stuck in mud because he bit on C.J. Stroud's fake, and he had a lane to go. And as he said, you run into the smoke, and it all clears up, and he was off to the races. So that was really, really good. Dalton Schultz. I think Dalton Schultz is the X factor. Dalton Schultz, who's been a disappointment in terms of his production. He's targeted 8 times last week, but he ended up with 4 catches for 27 yards. I don't blame him for the interception, but he's got to produce more. Some of it is that I think they've been asking him to do a lot in pass protection before he gets out on routes, so they can't necessarily get the ball quickly to him. But the Packers have allowed the second most receptions to tight ends in the NFL. It's been a weakness or at least a soft spot in their defense. So this could be the week that Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover perhaps go off a little bit, eat a little bit. I've got the Texans losing this game 22-21. At the end of the day, it's a coin toss, and I think it's going to come down to a really good play by one of these quarterbacks and a really bad play by one of these quarterbacks. So as much as we don't want to say it's Jordan Love versus C.J. Stroud, it's going to come down to that.